This month, in celebration of Erie's 150th anniversary, we'll talk to a professor from CU about the long-forgotten Indigenous past of the area. Then we'll discuss with Being Better Neighbors about where we are today and what we can all do to pave the way for a more inclusive future here in Erie. Joining me now is University of Colorado professor Ashley Lawrence Sanders. Ashley, thank you so much for meeting me at Erie Town Hall today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So you have been doing some diligent work researching Erie's Indigenous history. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for being here today to tell us all about it. So to start, why do you think this is important work to be done?
Well, Erie has a very important anniversary this year, and I came on last year to sort of highlight more broadly a history of Erie that tells sort of the fuller story of Erie's history. Indigenous people are part of that fuller story. Part of that is thinking about what Erie was before the town was officially settled. We know that, Indigenous people had passed through Colorado, some people passed through and left, but in the decades prior to the town settlement, there were important Native groups that actually helped shape what actually became Erie, the Arapaho and the Cheyenne notably. So I really wanted to look into how these people lived, right? What their lives were like, how those lives may have been upended, and were definitely upended by the continued presence of settlers, discovery of gold near Denver, which brought tens of thousands of people into Colorado and into this region, the establishment of coal mines here in Erie. All of this changed, the Homesteading Acts of, in 1860s. This made a very different area. It eventually led to them leaving, but thinking of them as a past group instead of a present group, I think is, a fallacy that we can't actually fall into. So I wanted to tell a historical narrative of them being part of Erie's history, not a thing that happened in the ancient past, but a thing that actually, was part of how Erie develops into Erie.
Absolutely. So have you hit any roadblocks so far in your research?
Yes, lots of roadblocks. I think whenever you research people in communities of color, it's difficult. There's not as much, we say, textual evidence, right? People unfortunately don't leave as many written narratives in the same way that we think of traditional archives and traditional written narratives. The written narratives about them come with bias often, so you often have to read through those to find the information that you want and need to tell particular stories and narratives. Post the 1870s sort of founding of Erie, it's very difficult to highlight what any Indigenous history around here may have looked like, right? Because a lot of Indigenous people were pushed out of this region. So that's been a particularly difficult roadblock to highlight because, most people either went north to reservations or south. So finding people who are still in the area, writing a bit about that history has been an incredibly difficult roadblock still.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And with the work you've done, is there anything that's really stood out to you or surprised you so far?
A few things. One is that a couple of times in the census records up to 1950, there were a few individuals who were listed as Indian in Erie, which I thought was interesting. To that time period, mostly people were either European immigrants or just listed as white, or they were of Mexican descent. That was the most majority of people of color. But we did get people who were explicitly listed as Indian that were living in Erie town. I found that fascinating, and I've been trying to find out more about them. Also, what I found out as well, looking through the Boulder County Latino History Project and reading some of the narratives from people who grew up in Erie, was that people of Mexican descent were proud of their Indigenous heritage as well, of course, right? So we think about the Indigenous heritage of just people who were, groups that were, Native or Indigenous to here in this particular region of Colorado. But there are people, from portions of Mexico who were like, yes, of course, like my mother was, this, and we were very proud of this Indigenous. I consider myself Indigenous and of, Mexican descent as well. And I think that's a part of it that we haven't even really thought through quickly. This town had a significant, Mexican American population, and those people as well also often had Indigenous ancestry that they were proud of, that shaped their daily lives as well. And I think that's sort of like an understudied part of how we can think through how Indigenous history and heritage manifested itself in Erie as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's very interesting. I know a lot of the coal miners are of Mexican descent, so yeah, that's interesting to hear that you're uncovering that as well. So,
Yes.
anything else you'd like the community to know about the work you're doing, or how they might be able to get involved in learning more about Erie's Indigenous history?
Well, really, we're looking forward to having the community more involved, I think, in this work going forward. As we approach the town's official anniversary celebrations, I think there will be opportunities for people in the town to talk more about their experiences in Erie. If people in the town have Indigenous ancestry or know people with Indigenous ancestry, I know people who are working on this project would love for you to come forward and talk about it. That is the element that we are trying to get more people to talk, because oral histories, particularly in communities of color, are incredibly important for chronicling these histories, but also, reading the histories of the Arapaho and the Cheyenne, reading about the Colorado War, which was what precipitated the dispossession, the removal of Indigenous people from this area. Those things were important in the couple of decades to the founding of Erie. So before settlers come in, in this kind of 1850s, 1860s time, there's this moment of tension, there's violence, there's raids, but it's all because of, all these various laws. The Treaty of Fort Wise, the Treaty of Fort Laramie, these are things that are available online, and you can see where, the entire northeast of Colorado, encompassing what is now Erie, was part of, this land that was Arapaho and Cheyenne land. Right? And then it goes from 44 million acres to 4 million acres. And you see the sort of physical manifestation of what that is from the 1850s to the 1860s. So I encourage people to look at that. I encourage people to, come forward. You can contact me. It's ashley.lawrence@colorado.edu. If you know people with Indigenous ancestry who have lived in Erie and who have stories about Erie, please do come forward. And we will be looking forward to hopefully highlighting more stories of people of color in Erie going forward.
Excellent. Well, Thank you again for the work you're doing, and I'm excited to see what else you can produce and hopefully what the community can also bring to the table as far as Erie's Indigenous history. So thank you again, Ashley.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Joining me now from Being Better Neighbors are Kelly Wagner-Grohl and Craig Foster. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Nice to see you. You too. Thank you. So to start, can you please tell us about what Being Better Neighbors is and how the organization came to be?
Yeah, sure. Being Better Neighbors is a community organization that wants to be inclusive of all people within the community. They believe that everyone should have a voice. I moved here in probably 2013, and I was one of the only people of color within our community that I had seen. At that time, it didn't feel very welcoming. There were a few people that we connected with when we first got here, but it still didn't feel like the community that we had moved from. As we moved forward, we get around 2019, 2020, during the George Floyd protests. The community as a whole came together to let their voices be heard that this was not acceptable. Seeing that happened, Being Better Neighbors knew that there was an opportunity to let those voices be heard, and wanted people to really form relationships and learn more about one another, learn about their neighbors, talk to their neighbors, and understand different communities from a different perspective.
Sure, yeah. And tell us about how residents can get involved with Being Better Neighbors. And I know you're at events throughout the year. And what are some other ways that people can reach out and find out how they can get involved?
Sure. So one of my favorite parts about Being Better Neighbors really is that it's in a collection of people who care, people who want to hear other voices, people who want to raise their hand and get involved, people who want to volunteer on our day of events, or maybe they want to be just more of a donation or a sponsor to certain things. There's several events that we put on or support throughout the year. And this year, we're so excited to bring back our Pride event that's going to take place in June, along with Juneteenth. And both of those events have grown exponentially since the inception of those. And then our second annual Hispanic Heritage is happening in the fall. And we're really excited that we have the opportunity to support and show through action and through allyship and really just walking alongside these types of individuals and the things that are important and we can celebrate together. And we've been just so incredibly happy with the way that our town has responded and supported it. For those that are looking to get involved, we have kind of two major sources that they can get information from. First is our Facebook page. Certainly lots of information and historical data of the things we've supported. And then our website, beingbetterneighbors.org. That is a location where you can get information about sponsoring, volunteering, being able to become a vendor at one of our events, and really being able to show your support and get involved. Whether you know a lot about these specific events or you have your own cause, that's really the beauty of being able to volunteer with an organization like this that really thrives on the fact that we have volunteers.
Excellent. Very cool. Well, thank you. Thank you both for telling us all about this. And before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like the community to know about Being Better Neighbors, or anything you have going on throughout the year?
Yeah, sure. Get involved. Just as Kelly pointed out, all the options to be involved in your community and to understand, to learn about other people. The goal is to have everyone's voice be heard. So let your voice be heard.
Yeah, I would add, I think that's great, Craig, and also is that Being Better Neighbors really is rooted in identifying and bringing together people of unique makeups, which we all are, and whether or not that, regardless of your heritage or your anything that makes you unique, we welcome that. We welcome the ideas. We welcome the ability to be allies with different causes that maybe we're not aware of, or to join forces in a partnership. And then also just really, evoke change and be able to say that every person matters, and specifically every person in Erie has a voice and a purpose, and we're excited to learn about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your work with Being Better Neighbors. It's important work, and we appreciate all you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And thank you for watching Inside Erie. We'll see you next time.